Welcome to another episode of Pistons of Fury. In this episode, we are wrapping up a ton of wiring work that we've been doing on the 66 Coronet LS Mopar swap. Wrapping up? Don't you think wrapping up is a little bit of a misnomer, Mr. Fury? It's been what? 5 months since you last posted to YouTube? Well, please, by all means, complete your wrapping up. Okay, so here we have the Holley drive-by-wire harness. It says very clearly on the harness, do not cut or modify. Also says that in the instruction manual that comes with the kit. We're going to cut and modify it. So the basic problem here is I want to use this throttle body that came with my truck setup, mostly because it's tougher to find a throttle body that's OEM that has this 3-hole configuration to mount that fits on the throttle body, that fits on the intake manifold, and also they're expensive, like $200, and I already have one, I know it works. I just have to repin it. So the pin, or the plug that comes with the Holley setup, is this 6-pin, which fits like your typical LS setup. Truck comes with 8-pin, and really all that's additional here is you have 2 pins that are kind of bridged for high and low, which is 5-volt and ground. So what we need to do here is basically depin this and just basically take the pins right out of this. These are identical terminal types. So we'll reuse 2 of these, we'll kind of splice into here and bridge our 5-volt and our ground, and then we'll have an 8-pin setup to work with my throttle body. So just got to depin these guys and then we'll get to splicing. Alright, a little update on what I'm doing here. So basically I've just been going back and forth between my factory service manual and these updated instructions from the Speedway harness. Again, this is a universal harness oriented toward GM, which is kind of okay for half this build, but when I get into reusing stock Mopar parts, like my ignition switch, I'm going to have to do this with the wiper switch and everything too, things get a little bit different. So, what I need to do here is, this is my connector for my default stock ignition switch, which I'm going to keep, because if I switch that out, no pun intended, then it's going to mess up things on my dash and it just won't look right. So, we're keeping the stock ignition switch. The difference here is that if you look at these holes here, we basically have, the way the Mopar originally is set up is you've got a ballast resistor, you have a distributor, all the old school stuff, and you have an ignition and an ignition 2. Which have different functions. But based on what I've read on the internet, guys who've run, Ron Francis, American Auto Wire, Painless, those type of harnesses, they also don't include provisions for ignition 2. So you basically just tie them together, right? If there's no old school system, and if you're running a relayed starter, which I'm gonna be, you just tie ignition 1 to ignition 2. So that's what I'm gonna do. So next up, we're gonna go back behind the dash and try to get this wired up. I have everything mapped, I think, the way I need it mapped, so we're gonna get going with that. Okay, so next up is swapping out the map connector on the top of the engine. So I have a 2.5 bar map sensor up there, and what they don't tell you with the Terminator X kit is that it basically comes with the connector for the 1 bar map sensor, which is the stock one. I don't know why they're different connectors, but they are. So this one's a little bit more squared off, and it has some of these pins. Interesting note, I got this off Amazon. It's kind of a cheap connector, but it'll get the job done. I did have to come in here and shave off these 2 bottom guide pins. They're plastic, they're part of the housing, so I just came in with a X-Acto blade and trimmed them off, and it fits fine. Clips in, all good. So basically just going to come in over the top and splice all these wires together, and then we should be all set for the map connector. Fury. What are you doing, Mr. Fury? Did you? No? Amazon specials, huh? Okay. What was that? Could have sworn I... Messing with my head, all this wiring. Okay, so this is my fan controller, as I think I mentioned before, either in this video or the last one. So I've basically pulled out, taken apart this connector, and I have made myself some wires. So these are the wires that will connect to the car. So I've got this big red one, which is going to go straight to the battery. So this is just a live feed. And then what I'm going to do is get a small 40 amp circuit breaker inline to just run that around here. So basically I'm just going to come out of this, I'll loop around to a circuit breaker and then run straight to the battery. So still have to do that. And then this one will just go to chassis ground wherever my relay box grounds to. So these will run to the chassis, and then I have 2 separate lines made with the other connectors that go into this connector, or with the other pins that go into the connector, and these will go straight to the fan. So on my fan I have a connector already pre-wired, so I just need to get the right length for these once I get this installed in the car and get everything cut to length. So I've got a spot picked out, so let's jump over to the car. Okay, so the fan controller is just going to drop in right here. I already have rib nuts installed. I feel like I've done that enough in these videos that I don't need to necessarily film all of that. Not taking shortcuts, but trying to keep this interesting. So fan controller is going to go right here. We're going to have two wires that come down, route under the radiator to the clip on my fan shroud, and that's where we're going to make the connection to the fan. Again, this is a PWM controller, so one of the other wires that I didn't mention over on the workbench is the PWM control, which I already have pre-run to my Terminator X right here. So I've got a bunch of extra wire. This will run as part of my Firewall to, I guess it's front bulkhead? I don't know what you call this, radiator support. I've got a bunch of wires for the headlights running up here for the horns, so that'll be part of that loom. And we'll basically come up here, power this guy. That'll keep my fan running nice and controlled, not full blast all the time. So I'm just going to get this installed. Alright, so we're getting started now on wiring our main relay and fuse box. So I have this, we have super high level, again this is the SSVEC, we have 8 relays here, 8 corresponding fuses, and the way this works is there are 4 plugs, so 2 on 2 sides, and basically what we have here is this blue one, which is right here, that's going to be my, essentially my high beams. Green one is horn and AC. Gray one down here is coils and injection, and then transmission and start solenoid for this black one, and then there's actually a relay that's kind of bridged between these two connectors right here that will be my low beams. So each of these pins coming in has a corresponding pin that goes to one of the fuses and then to a relay. And basically this is all just indicating you know, how the 5-pin, so these are 5-pole relays, they're micro relays but they're still 5-pole. Which means you have the option to do kind of a switch thing, but for the most part I'm going to be using them just like a regular 4-pole relay. So a couple things to note here. We have a few things that are basically triggered by ignition on, which are the transmission and the AC. Although now that I think about it, that might change. Start is triggered by the ignition start, the key in the start position. And then headlights are triggered by the switch, coils and ignition are triggered by the fuel pump signal from the Terminator X, and then horn is obviously triggered by the horn button. So we're going to get started in pinning these. I finally found all the correct connectors. I'll drop some links in the description for this video so that you guys can actually source those, because they don't come with this box when you get it. So this actually took me some time to track all that stuff down. But anyway, we're going to get started in doing these. We'll start with the simple ones first, probably the low beams, high beams, horn, and coils, injectors, because I already have all that stuff pre-wired. So let's get moving and get this thing hooked up. Alright, so where we are is we have this thing actually almost all the way wired up, which is pretty awesome, because this has been it's been a long journey just to get to this point of getting everything kind of terminated at this relay box. So just to recap, we have our, let's see, I don't have the diagram right in front of me, but basically we've got transmission, the whole thing's grounded, so I have it grounded out to the firewall. Also did the ground for my my fan relay or fan PWM control module at the same time. So that's back here somewhere. Yeah, just have a stud in the firewall and have everything anchored there. So basically have everything run from inside the car that needs to come out here, the engine bay, and then my outputs for each of the relays I have running down and to the front. So kind of have everything secured down here, and we've got our lights and horns and everything out the front of the car, so I'll do that when I start to get the front put back together. And then the one thing I had to figure out was just how I was going to run my AC compressor. So I've got a AC control in, and we're going to run, so I have this white wire here, which is also kind of run up to the front, and that's going to go over and across, and that'll control the compressor. So I'll get into AC later when I do the whole HVAC system. Basically I'm running through the Terminator X, and that will control whether AC stays on or is off. So I'm starting to get a little bit cleaned up in here. Wiring is going to be nice. We're going to keep everything tucked down below by the frame rail, and then back here there will be a couple visible runs that'll have some sheathing on them, and then there will be a main run that kind of goes behind the engine. And also working on getting this cleaned up in here and tucked under my fuel rail. So not going to sheath everything yet, do the loom wrapping and all that until I make sure that everything works for real, in case I have to go chase down any bad connections or anything. So that is, that's it for the engine compartment right now. I have a few more things to do up here. I need to get a switch for my AC dryer, so that's just a high-low pressure switch. That'll be part of the AC wiring. Just want to make sure that I have that accounted for, so I'll go ahead and get that wired into the cabin. And what else? Boost control solenoid is all wired up here, but I need to connect that to the Terminator X. So got a spare wire for that, but we are actually getting close. So the one big thing I have to do in the engine compartment that's still left to do is the grounds. I need to do a solid ground to the chassis. I need to ground so chassis to engine to back of the cylinder head, and then I think that should be good enough for the engine. And then once we have that, we just have to finish the stuff under the dash, and I think we're good on wiring. One other thing is that I have, I've got on order my shifter and also my methanol injection kit. Both of those, I've got the wires run for those, but I don't have the actual products because of the worldwide COVID plus China tariff nonsense. It kind of screwed up everybody's supply chains, and that stuff is on back order. So I'll get it sometime this summer, I guess, is what Summit's telling me. But anyway, I'm rambling now, so yeah, that's where we are. Let's keep moving. Through the access hole, that, and then I've got my Alright, we've been pretty busy here behind the scenes, getting a lot of this wiring cleaned up. I believe where I last left you guys is I had this engine compartment pretty well sorted. I've got everything run to my relay box with the exception of the AC. I know how I'm going to run that, I don't have my pressure switch for this, and I don't have it wired to the compressor yet. So TBD on that. Moving into the car, we've got almost everything, actually everything is connected here, so the only things outstanding are the fuel pressure sensor, the lines for my methanol injection kit, which I don't have yet, and then I've got these, all the wires basically that power the dash. I don't have the correct connector for that, or the connect terminals, so that's okay, that's not super critical because I've got everything I need instrument-wise through the Terminator X. Let's see, and then the big thing that's not wired correctly on the car right now, or that's not terminated, are all of the lights. Interior lights, rear lights, front lights. Just because I'm going to wait until I have power, which hopefully will be in a few minutes, to trace those out, make sure I get the circuits right, because I've got LEDs going in the rear, some other stuff in the front. It's going to get a little complicated, so I just want to make sure I have power so I can actually make sure I'm connecting things up correctly. But everything, kind of see down there, I've got my loom pretty much taped up, how I'm going to have it for good. Everything is connected into the engine compartment. Then moving back here to the back of the car, we've got everything connected, terminated, grounded, etc. So that little breaker, kind of right, circuit breaker right there, I've had it flipped off, protecting everything, and I'm about to hit it and hope nothing sparks, catches on fire, hope it doesn't trip. So let's jump in the car and give it a shot. Okay, so if this goes well, absolutely nothing will happen when I flip this. So let's hope for nothing. And I heard nothing. That's great. So no smoke, no sparks, no tripping breaker. Everything should have power, so we're going to pull out the multimeter and start checking some stuff. Here. So we're going 12 volts. or resist. So I've pulled this neutral safety switch, or kind of gear selector switch, part of my harness off the stock harness. This is just the plug. I want to reuse this. So basically what I need from this stock or OEM neutral safety switch is a couple things. I don't need the positioning because my new shifter actually has the has an output for what position it's in, so that's all good there. However, I do need a place for my neutral safety switch wiring to go, which are these two pink ones. And then I also need, let's see, a couple other things. I need backup lights, and then there's a ground in here, and the park neutral position switch signal, which I think I'm going to take from here instead of taking it from the shifter. So I've got to figure out exactly where I'm getting what from, probably draw that up. But I need this, and I don't need my position switches, so I'm going to depin these guys. Okay, so one of the last things that I need to do to complete the wiring in the engine compartment is wire up my alternator. If you've looked into this at all, or if you struggle with this part of your build, a lot of conflicting information on the internet about this. So I think what I've found, and my interpretation of everything that I've read, is that you've basically got a 4-pin plug, 2 outside pins are not used. The 2 middle ones, you can wire it basically one wire, so you can go straight to where I have this black wire here, that's pin B, and you can go with a resisted wire. Holly sells one for 20 bucks. You can buy this whole thing, and it basically just has an inline resistor, like 570 ohms, something like that, and that makes sure that the alternator is getting good signal and that it knows when to charge so you don't overcharge. You can also run a switched 12 volt just straight from your ignition switch to pin C, which is what I'm going to be doing. So I'm basically going to have a light bulb, standard automotive light bulb, in line with this black wire here, and this one will go straight to 12 volt. They'll both basically be from the same switch 12 volt source, but one will be resisted and one will not. So yeah, just going to get started. I need to cut these and get this ready for the engine compartment, and then we'll run it back into the cabin and attach it to my 12 volt source on my ignition switch. Okay, so the last thing you saw me doing in here was getting this 40 amp circuit breaker set up. So basically I have that in between my, essentially my PWM controller for my fan, which I now have installed over here. And basically that just runs straight to solid 12 volt from the battery. So it kind of comes back up through here, under there, and I'll integrate that with the rest of my wiring harness for the engine bay, but that basically taps right into here on one of these main battery feeds. So you need direct battery power. This pulls a lot of amps, these fans do, the electric fans. So you need to have that circuit breaker, especially if you're using a PWM. This is essentially a really fancy relay that does the PWM control. So you don't need a relay, but you do need a fuse /and/or breaker. I went with the breaker because it's easy to correct. I won't have to carry a bunch of fuses around with me, so that's what that is. So that was kind of the last thing I need to do up here in the engine compartment. I do have a little bit of cleanup, obviously, and some tucking and organizing with the wires. Actually, I do have one more thing, and that's my AC ground. So that's the last little termination thing in the engine bay, so that's super cool. But yeah, we're back into the inside of the car to wrap up some of this stuff on the dash, which is still a little bit of a mess. So let's get on that. What we have here is Holley's 554-165 IO module. So basically what pushed me over my 4 inputs, 4 outputs limit on the stock Terminator X was my desire to have a basically paddle shift or shift up, shift down on my shifter. When you do that, you basically take up 3 inputs with that. So you need essentially the enable and then the tap up shift, tap down shift. And you have to use the built-in ports on the Holley. You can't use these, so those take up 3 out of your 4 Terminator X inputs. So if you have anything else like AC control or anything like that, you're going to need to basically overflow onto this. So this is a $350 module. It's actually the same form factor, the same case and everything as the EGT, which I already have in the car, so you guys will see that when I go in and install this. Basically what it does, they just give you 8 pre-terminated wires for your input and 8 for your output, and it comes already with the ground's tethered. It comes with your CAN harness, so you can basically just tap right into your existing CAN setup. So you've got the integration and then the pass-through. So you can loop in your 3.5 inch screen, or if you're going with like a pro screen. The other option, if you want to expand your I/O, is to go with one of their dash products, but that was another $600-700 on top of this. So I just went with this. I may go to the dash at some point in the future, but I think because I'm tuning with my laptop, mostly I will just be able to use that little 3.5 inch to show my vitals when I'm driving around. So we are going to dig into this. A couple notes real quick. So it basically just comes with this really simple PDF. Well, it's printed out, I guess, but it's a couple pages. It's like bare bones install, but on their website you can download the full 12-page thing and print that out or do whatever you're going to do with it. So I got that printed out, and I'm using that to basically map all of my inputs and outputs. And now we have to probably undo a couple things because I've already terminated some of my I/O, so I need to redo that, map them to this module, and get the CAN set up, and that will actually be the last thing I need to do on my wiring. Alright, so wiring is no joke. Um, Especially making it look nice. So I've been in here, you just saw through the past however many clips, because I haven't done a little update in a while, just getting everything loomed, right? Getting everything, now that I have it routed. So let's start over here. And we've got this big main harness that goes behind the engine, so that's the main Terminator X harness. But also some of the other body wiring that I have. Starter, all that stuff kind of travels through there. It's loomed separately. If I ever need to get to it, I sure as hell hope I don't. Relay box all set up. Got my little circuit breaker down there wired up to the fan controller. Right now I just have the wires going kind of pinned with my magnetic clips, or magnetic wire mount holder things, along with my oil line that goes under the radiator, and have everything up on top of the engine looking pretty clean. I'll probably tuck this in with some zip ties along with this one. I've just got my big main harness coming right through here, tucked under the fuel rail. Let's see, things of note. So right now I am doing a little bit of a test with my EGT probe. So I have my both sides run back through my grommet in the Firewall, and coming in here to the passenger cabin. Let's see, I've got my Holly set up, just have everything kind of zip tied together right now because it was flopping all over the place and I just wanted it secured. So I have my main wiring loom coming up here through the glove box, which is where it's going to live permanently. Have that guy dangling there, but everything back here, you can kind of see it, is all loomed pretty nicely. So the main thing I have here is now my EGT probes are coming in. They need to connect over here to these yellow guys, which are all nicely lettered. I was thinking about cutting these down to size, but it just looks like I kind of started thinking about it, and I don't know how in the world I would strip the... Check. Well, Fury, credit where credit's due. You may have gotten the car to a point where maybe you're able to start it soon. Maybe even drive it. But you know what? We're not done. Because I know, as well as you, that every project is 90% complete. I'll be back, Fury. So that's a wrap on this part of the project. This wiring thing has taken me the better part of this year, which if you're watching this later is 2021. Kind of kicked this off the beginning of this year, and it is now September. So like if you're counting, if you're keeping score at home, this has been like a 9-month project. So full chassis rewire. I've done a lot of stuff in between the wiring, kind of some on camera, some off camera. I've got a bunch of episodes coming up dealing with things like EGT install, transmission, shifter, methanol kit, right? All that kind of stuff that touches wiring but is not like a wiring-centric project. That's coming up, so stay tuned for that. There will be more videos in this build series covering all that stuff. I've captured hundreds of gigs of footage throughout this time period, so I'm going to post this one up, just the video you're watching right now. So that wraps up the bulk of the wiring, and we're actually at a point where we can actually start doing some startup prep for the car. So super exciting. It's been a long, hard push to get it to this point, but that was kind of the big part of the project, and now hopefully we get into some of the fun stuff where we get to start it up and see what works, see what doesn't work, and start tuning, and then start driving the thing. So thanks so much for hanging in there. Hope you enjoyed the video. Shoot me some feedback. Like, comment, whatever. Ask me questions. Happy to answer any of those. And stay tuned for more frequent uploads and more on this project to come. Ooh, look at me. We're vlogging now. Well, what exactly do you call this, Fury? This looks like a disaster zone. Is this what you call wrapping up? Is this a finished project? I don't think so. You've been in project hell for almost 6 months now, and you're nowhere near done. Keep
Keep trying, though. A for effort.